Hi, everyone. Welcome, welcome. We're so happy that you are here. I am just opening up the room, so people are going to start joining us. Welcome to this evening's virtual event with Julia Cameron in conversation with Joel Fotinos. My name is Carell Centers, and I'm the events director here at Bookshop Santa Cruz, where I'm broadcasting live. And I am so thrilled to be back with you all. This is our first event of the new year. And what a better way to open this chapter than with Julia and Joel to celebrate today's release of Seeking Wisdom, a Spiritual Path to Creative Connection. Tonight's event is being co-sponsored by the Catamaran Literary Reader, an absolutely incredible creative arts and lit magazine helmed by two of Santa Cruz's luminaries, Catherine Sagerson and Elizabeth McKenzie. I definitely invite you to check out Catamaran and their programming and events, and I will put a link in the chat to check them out. Tonight, Julia and Joel will have a conversation about seeking wisdom, and later they'll answer some of your questions. But before we get started, a quick overview of the event platform here. We are in a Zoom webinar, and we cannot see or hear you at home. But we are, of course, here together, and I welcome you to drop a line in the chat if you feel inclined to let us know where you're tuning in from. It's nice to create a sense of community here. Just make sure if you want to chat to all of us that it is selected to go to everyone so we can all see. And thanks in advance for being respectful there, of course. You can also, of course, just sit back and let the chat go by without you. Closed captioning is automatically on, but you can hide it if you'd like. And this event is being recorded so that you can rewatch it if you miss anything. We will send out a link to that recording tomorrow, about 24 hours from now. You can also find the event on our YouTube page, which again, I'll put a link to that in the chat, and that'll be up later tonight if you can't wait for tomorrow. We will be having, like I mentioned, a Q&A. You can enter those in the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen. Just click on that tab. You can pop your questions in as the talk is underway. Like I said, we'll have time for those at the end of the event tonight. So really looking forward to hearing all of your questions. We definitely encourage you to buy the book if you don't already have it. It is pub date, as we say in the business. The book is on shelves today. Your purchase from Bookshop Santa Cruz supports local jobs and independent culture, and it shows the publisher that our audience is invested and engaged. So thank you so much for your purchase. Our author events are still all virtual. I know it's disappointing, but it means we can all be together from all around the world. So there's some good components to it. We have some great stuff coming up, including Thursday's event with Leonard Modena for Emotional, How Feelings Shape Our Thinking. And we have an event next week with the Poet Laureate of Santa Cruz, David Sullivan, with Farnaz Fatemi for a poetry event. I welcome you back to both of those. But now on to the main attraction. Hailed by the New York Times as the Queen of Change, Julia Cameron is credited with starting a movement in 1992 that has brought creativity into the mainstream conversation, in the arts, in business, and in everyday life. The Artist's Way has been translated into 40 languages and sold over 5 million copies to date. And Julia is also the best-selling author of more than 40 books, fiction and nonfiction, a poet, songwriter, filmmaker, and playwright. Commonly referred to as the godmother or high priestess of creativity, her tools are based in practice, not theory, and she considers herself the floor sample of her own toolkit. And tonight, Julia will be in conversation with Joel Fotinos. Joel is a publisher, author, and minister, and the founder, vice president, and editorial director of St. Martin's Essentials, which is an imprint of the St. Martin's Publishing Group. Prior to that, Joel has worked for Penguin Random House and HarperCollins, and he was also the religions and philosophy buyer for several years at the Tattered Cover Bookstore in Denver, Colorado. So from one bookseller to another, I'm very excited for this conversation. We are so grateful to have them both here with us tonight. Welcome, Julia and Joel. Hello.
Hi, Carell. Hi, Joel.
Hi, Julia. Thank you, Carell.
Thank you. I will see you all in about 40 minutes for the Q&A.
Okay, perfect.
Well, this is exciting.
Congratulations, everyone. This is pub date, and this is the book, and it looks handsome, like Joel, which is a nice thing. I wanted to start off by reading you a poem that was the sort of the genesis of the book, because people feel that creativity is born out of pain. And I have discovered that creativity is also born out of bliss. So I want to read you this poem, and if you'll bear with me, I'll step out from behind the artist's way and be the artist for a minute, and say, here is a poem. It's called Jerusalem is Walking in This World. This is a great happiness. The air is silk. There is milk in the looks that come from strangers. I could not be happier if I were bread and you could eat me. Joy is dangerous. It fills me with secrets. Yes, kisses in my veins. The pains I take to hide myself are sheer as glass. Surely this will pass. The wind like kisses, the music in the soup, the group of trees laughing as I say their names. It is all Hosanna. It is all prayer. Jerusalem is walking in this world. Jerusalem is walking in this world. So that was the launch of Seeking Wisdom. It was a belief that it was all Hosanna, it was all prayer. And I was writing for guidance, which is something that I have been doing now for more than 30 years. And I said, what should I write next? And then I listened, and I thought maybe they were going to tell me to write a Miami Vice again, or to go back and work for Rolling Stone again. And instead, I heard prayer. And I thought, oh dear God, no, not prayer. That's too solemn. I don't believe I have enough to say. And the guidance said, it's a good topic. And sort of closed the book on it. And so I found myself thinking, well, if I'm writing a book on prayer, I don't want to appear to be talking down from some pedestal, because that's not been my experience of prayer. So I thought, well, maybe I better start the book off with my own story of how I came to pray. And so that involved a big bottle of J&B Scotch, a gram of cocaine, and a belief that prayer was not necessary. I had been brought up with 16 years of Catholic education, which I sometimes say that's sort of the grease slide to atheism, or at least agnosticism. And so I made a phone call at the suggestion of a friend to talk to an alcoholic. She said to me, I think you need to talk to another alcoholic. And I was very offended. And I said, Claudia, you don't think I'm an alcoholic just because I'm drinking around the clock, just because I'm getting sick in the mornings, just because I'm having blackout memory losses. You can't think I'm an alcoholic. And Claudia just said, well, and she let the syllable hang. And I defensively said, that's all right. I'll call. So I called up the other alcoholic that Claudia had on the line. And I said to her, I think I'm an alcoholic, and I know I'm a screenwriter. I was trying to hold on to some prestige. And what happened was she patched me through to yet another alcoholic. And that woman said, well, if you really want to stay sober, you're going to have to pray. And I said, you don't understand. Prayer and I do not get along. I can't believe in our Father. I don't like the term. And God Almighty sounds pretty formidable to me. So I won't pray. And she said, well, then you won't stay sober. And I thought, oh dear, I think I'm cornered. And she said, well, you must believe in something. And I said, well, and I thought about it. And I asked a friend what she believed in, and she said she believed in Mick Jagger. And I asked another friend what she believed in, and she said she believed in sunspots. So I thought, well, what I believe in is a line from Dylan Thomas, the force that through the green fuse drives the flower. That specific creative energy. I thought I can pray to that. So I started praying to the creative force, please keep me sober today. And then I came to my senses and I said, but if it's a choice between creativity and sobriety, I'm not sure I'm going to choose sobriety. I was uppity. And I was told, sweetheart, without sobriety, there will be no creativity. And that frightened me. And then they said, you might want to try letting the creative force right through you. And I thought to myself, what if it doesn't want to? But I tried it. And what I found was that my ego was sort of lifted out of my writing and set to one side. And I began to write to try and be of service. And what happened was that previously I had been, as I said, a Rolling Stone writer, a Miami Vice writer, a Village Voice writer, very groovy, very hip. And what I found was that when I was trying to write that way, I was trying to be brilliant. And now I was being asked to be of service. So I started praying, dear God, please let me be useful. And I was told, put this little sign up by your writing station. Okay, God, you take care of the quality. I'll take care of the quantity. So I began to write, trying to take care just of the quantity. And what happened was the quality improved. And my career took off. And I began to have the experience of having writing right through me. So this is a long story telling you the genesis of my prayers, and that they weren't from a pedestal. They were from a cornered alcoholic saying, dear God, please help me. I think it's your turn, Joel.
Well, and I was going to say, in a way, from reading the introduction of the book, which the whole book is so warm and personable and wonderful, but in the introduction where you tell some of that story, it seems like this kind of hitting bottom really was the origin of what became the Artist's Way process. Would you say that's true?
I would say it's true. The idea that came to me about the Artist's Way was born of my own experience, that we were all creative, and that if we invoked the help of a higher power, whichever you want to call it, the universe, Obi-Wan Kenobi, spirit, God, you don't need to have a specific name for it, but you need to invoke it. And when you did, doors started to fly open, and you found yourself being far more creative than you had previously imagined possible.
That's amazing. I want to remind people we're going to do a Q&A, and if you look at the bottom of your screen, or at least on my screen, it's at the bottom, there's a button that says Q&A, and you can write your questions there. And Julia will get to the questions in a little while. So would you say then, maybe this is oversimplifying it, but would you say then that prayer is what connected you then to creativity moving forward?
I think that's accurate. I think that where previously I had been writing out of ego, wanting to be brilliant, now I was writing out of service, wanting to be useful. And what I found was that my writing began to flow more easily. And I was no longer the tortured artist. I was, in fact, a little bit happy.
There are artists out there that feel like they have to be tortured in order to be creative. And you heard the voice that said just the opposite.
Right. I found myself feeling that joy, bliss, glee could be the birthplace of creativity.
Now, I just have to get the elephant out of the room right away. And this is for people who see that it's a book on prayer, and they may think to themselves that they don't believe in God. And you actually say on page 20, you say, but Julia, I am sometimes asked, what if it's just your imagination that your prayers are answered? So what do people have to believe in God? And what if it's just your imagination that is answering these prayers?
Okay, I don't think you need to believe in God. You know, as I said, I had friends who believed in Mick Jagger and sunspots. I think that you need to believe that if you do the practice, you will wake up. And I would tend to call that a spiritual awakening, but I recognize that that's sort of off-putting. So I want to say that what you wake up is a sense of what you might call the muse, the spirit. I have a friend who said to me, Julia, I have been writing morning pages, which are a tool of this book, 3 pages of longhand morning writing every day. I have been writing morning pages faithfully every day for 23 years, and I am an atheist. But I've written 13 feature films. So I said to him, well, clearly you don't believe in God, but God believes in you. And I find that one of the other tools of this book is a tool of asking for guidance.
I was just going to ask you about that.
You say, what about X? And you pose the question and then you listen. And when you listen, you get surprisingly direct and simple advice. And I think it's very powerful. And I have had people say to me, Julia, you've written 40 books. Why are you suddenly talking about prayer? And I go, well, if you looked at The Artist's Way, it's called The Spiritual Path to Higher Creativity. And in it, I talk about morning pages being a conduit to the higher power. And at the end of morning pages, I suggest writing LJ for little Julie or little Joel or little Corral, your initials L and then your initial. And then you ask your question. And when you pose your question, you will hear, and I want you to believe that you need to try this because a lot of times people are skeptical when they hear the description, but then they're practical once they start using it. So the guidance clears a path for you and is a sort of shorthand, a quick way to go further.
And in fact, you've actually made it one of the tools of this book. You have the morning pages, the artist day, the walking, and you've added guidance as a tool. And you describe in the introduction and then also in the book itself how to do that. And in the introduction, you talked about that you would listen and then you would just start writing down what you heard without judging it.
Yes, you have another tool, morning pages, which teaches you how to write around your censor and around your critic. You write your morning pages, and they can be about anything or everything, from the petty to the profound. And your critic will perk up its ears and say, "Oh, you're being boring." And then you say to your critic, "Ah, thank you for sharing." And you keep right on writing. And that portable skill of stepping past your critic becomes a tool that's very useful when you get to the guidance tool. Because again, when you start asking, "Can I hear about X?" your critic will perk up and say, "No, you can't hear about X. But you will hear something about X." And so you write down the something that you hear.
And you've been doing guidance for, I mean, how long have you been writing about or using guidance in your writing?
Well, officially 30 years. This is the 30-year anniversary of The Artist's Way. And it's been very surprising and enjoyable that during the pandemic, people have turned to the book for guidance. So it's popping up on bestseller lists after 30 years. And I think that we are led a step at a time into guidance.
When people listen to these words about guidance, I think one of the questions they might ask is, can I ask for guidance about anything?
And the answer is yes, you can ask for guidance about anything, from romance to finance. And I think that we are well and carefully led, and we're given guidance of sort of a peek around the corner. I don't want to say we all develop ESP, but the truth is we all develop ESP. And you have a glimpse around the corner and a deeper glimpse into what's driving you. I was married and I was in the middle of a terrible divorce. I was still in love with my husband, and I started asking for guidance, wanting to get over him, thinking I was being too codependent. Can't you get over him? Can't you get rid of it already? And the guidance said, "Sweetheart, love is eternal." And so I stopped fighting with myself and just sort of resigned myself. Oh dear, I'm divorced, but I still love him. Well, so it goes.
You do say that guidance actually makes things very simple.
Yes, it makes things approachable. I want to tell a story about you. You were my publisher at Tarcher, where we published The Artist's Way, and we worked together for 27 years. And then you decided to move to St. Martin's. But I had a book promised to Tarcher for them to get a first look. And only then afterwards could I show it to you. And I showed it to Tarcher, hoping that they would reject it so that I could just follow you blithely to St. Martin's. But what they did was offer me a bundle of money to stay. So I went to guidance and I said, what am I going to do? I have my promise to Joel, but then there's all that money. And the guidance said, keep your promise. So I said, but the money. And the guidance said, keep your promise. And I finally said, oh, all right, I'll keep my promise. And I turned down all the money from Tarcher and took the book over to you. And then I waited on pins and needles to see if you liked the book. And you came back and liked the book. And it was called The Listening Path. And it,
Yep, that was this one.
yes, it was published by St. Martin's. And happily, they offered me more money than Tarcher. And so I thought, wow, guidance is pretty shrewd.
I was going to say, we offered you a bunch of money too.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny that guidance works that way. You asked that and didn't know what the outcome was, but you followed what it said. And it ended up being better than if you hadn't followed it.
Well,
I'm sure you've had that experience a lot, right? Over the years.
I was just going to say, my experience with guidance is that it's trustworthy. And I'm saying this hoping that everybody who's listening will say, oh, I'd like that higher guidance. I think I'll try it.
I hope that they do it in context of this book, because I love how you bring people through this 6-week process with the different forms of prayer and using guidance kind of as a foundation for all of it. And it's very, very powerful for people. I think they're going to really love it.
Well, we maybe should talk a little bit about the fact that the book talks about prayer in a number of different ways.
Weirdly, that was my next question. Can you describe the different types of prayer that you lead people through? We're in total sync.
All right, so we start off with please do morning pages, please take walks, please take yourself out on a solo fun expedition called an artist day, please write guidance. So that's the foundation. And it's a firm, solid foundation that has been being used, well, now by millions of people. Then I say, well, let's look at the kinds of prayer that you might try. And the first form of prayer is one we're all familiar with, which is called the prayer of petition. And this is sort of the prayer to a Santa Claus God. Dear God, please give me what I want. And P.S., please give it to me now. And the prayer of petition finds you sort of acknowledging that God is greater and more powerful and able to do anything. And then when you get an answer, it's either yes, no, or not now. And so we find ourselves aligning ourselves with a belief that the higher power does know better. So that's the prayer of petition. Then comes a prayer after the prayer of petition for the waking up heart, called the prayer of gratitude. And this is very personal. And it's a delightful practice. And you take a pen to page and you say, I'm grateful that, and you enumerate, well, I'm grateful for my health. I'm grateful for my curly hair. I'm grateful for my friendships. I'm grateful for my house. I'm grateful for my dog. I'm grateful, and you list away. And what happens when you do prayers of gratitude is that your heart opens further, and you find yourself feeling sort of exhilarated, like, oh my God, I have so much to be grateful for. So then this brings us to the final form of prayer, which is a prayer of praise. And I call this the Wow God prayer. So this comes when you see a full moon and you appreciate its maker, and you're like, wow, God, that's beautiful. So the Wow God prayer is a prayer of just, it is all Hosanna. Jerusalem is walking in this world. Jerusalem is walking in this world. So I have a poem that relates to the Wow God. So I'm going to read you one more poem, and it's called Unprepared. I'm not prepared for this. I can't pronounce this bliss. The way we flow, the knowing where to go. This ebb and flow, can't we take it slow? Where are the walls, the shadows in the halls? This light, can it be right? Where does it come from? I've known a different sun, walked a different earth where air was used for grieving. I think we're leaving. Before we met, I knew your face from stars and stones. I knew your name from wind and grasses. Before we met, the red earth held my heart. The sky cradled my dreams. The forest floor was my green bed. These were what I wed before we met. Now that you are here, I'm wed to galaxies. Our sky does not contain me. Our sun is a candle to what I see. Sheer as a cliff, the walls drop away. So sheer as a cliff, the walls drop away.
Beautiful. You know, that makes me want to remind people who are listening that your website, juliacameronlive.com, if people go there, there are whole sections that have a lot of your art, poems, music, just so much art and joy is on there. So, and it's all just available. You just go there and it's available. So it's juliacameronlive.com, and it's just such a delight. Let me ask you this, we're running out of time. We're going to get to some Q&As in a minute, but you write about prayer and creativity and the kind of how creativity and prayer go hand in hand. Is there, what, can you describe that connection between prayer and not just creativity, but the productivity of creativity and how it will help creative people, you know, create more art?
Well, I want to say, I ask my friends to pray for my creativity. and that it's a practice that more people should try because it's very powerful. And I have a friend, Scotty, who gets up every morning at 3:30, believe it or not, and lights some incense to send her prayers to the heavens and prays for ease and joy, that her day unfold with ease and joy. And I found that when I ask Scotty to pray for me, I get a little emotional boost. And creativity is directly connected to prayer, because when we are praying to the higher power, we're praying to a creative energy, to a creative source. And what happens is that we start to open up. We start to have new ideas. We find ourselves sometimes pampering ourselves, which, you know, we're so used to thinking we have to flog ourselves ahead. And instead, I say, no, pamper yourself a little bit, sweetheart. And we try and coax people forward. And what I find with creativity and spirituality is that we are often coaxed in unexpected directions, and that it's very rewarding, and it's very surprising. And we often take a position before we try practicing this. We take a position of, oh, I can't do that. We think we know just how creative we are, just our height. And when our morning pages suggest a risk and say, why don't you try writing music? You might say, like I did, I'm 45 years old. If I were the least bit musical, I would know it. And then the guidance said, you will be writing radiant songs. And I thought, oh dear God, no, I'm not creative. I'm, as a musician, that's for the rest of my family. And then I went down and sat by a creek in the Rocky Mountains, and I sat on a boulder, and all of a sudden I heard, my green heart is filled with apples. Your dark face is filled with stars. I am the one that you've forgotten. You are the one my heart desires. So dance when you think of me, sing to remember me, sing till your heart can see who we are. Dance when you think of me, sing to remember me, sing till your heart can see who we are. And I thought, my God, it's a song. And I didn't know that I could write songs. And since then, I've written many songs. And as Joel said, they're on my website. There's something called the Flower Songs, which I worked with.
Wonderful.
I worked with a composer named Emma Lively, and we wrote 44 powerful flower songs.
And they're all up there. It's so great. Plus your musicals are up there and everything else. And I remember when you would have a little keyboard that you would take with you and write music using just that little electronic keyboard. I think it's time to answer some questions. So Carell will come back and facilitate the questions.
Thank you so much. What an amazing conversation this has been. The poetry and then the music to top it all off. Wow, that was just so lovely. Thank you. So just a reminder to folks, if you missed the memo and you would like to ask a question, please click on the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen. So I will dive in here with some audience questions. We have a question from Muffy, who says, I have found much the same experiences that Julia is describing, and yet I am currently unable to ask for guidance. Have you ever struggled with asking or with listening to what returns, and how have you dealt with your own periods of difficulty?
Well, I want to ask her if she's writing morning pages. Because
Muffy, are you writing? I'll ask if she wants to tell us in the chat. People are talking about their morning pages a bit too, which is super interesting. Muffy, are you writing your morning pages? Well, we will find out. Not yet. Okay, there we go.
She said, not yet, Julia. She's not writing them yet.
Well, I think you have to do the morning pages as the bedrock tool of a creative recovery. And what it does is train you to stand aside and write freely. And I think trying to do guidance without morning pages, it's no wonder that you're blocked. So just please start with morning pages. And then I think you're going to find yourself allowing guidance to come through. But you need to sort of swing open an inner portal.
And the book has, and many of her books have the instructions on how to do morning pages and the other tools of the Artist's Way.
There's even like there's a lot of prompts and things in there as well. So you'll find the tools that you need. Muffy, good luck.
And Muffy wrote she will do this, and she thanked you, Julia.
Bravo. Thank you, Muffy.
Let's move to a question from Erica, who says, I find myself also calling on creatives, philosophers, and mystics who have passed on for guidance and wisdom. Is that nuts? And oh yeah, beautiful.
So I want to say to you, no, it isn't nuts. And when I wrote The Listening Path, I wrote an entire chapter about seeking inspiration from people who had passed on, both our beloveds and our heroes. And I think we live in an interesting world. You know, our country doesn't think much about ancestors. We're more, quote, modern than that. And yet, if you were in Japan, you would have an altar to your ancestors. And I have a friend, a Lakota elder, a man named Scott Thomas, who does a morning practice every day of seeking wisdom from his ancestors. And he swears by it. And I have two people that I routinely seek guidance from. One of them is an actress named Jane Cecil, and the other is a horsewoman named Alberta Hanstein. And I ask Jane and Alberta for guidance, and I get it. And so this is where I say my tools are practical. If you use them, you experience an inner shift. So before you think something's crazy, try it.
Julia, Erica also wanted to know, what is the lipstick that you're wearing?
Aha. It's called Breathing Fire. It's by MAC.
Breathing Fire by MAC. Awesome.
Thanks, Joel. I appreciate that. Great. And Joel, if you see any in here, any gems that you'd like to post, please feel free. All right. I like this question from Michelle. How does the aspect of childlikeness or childlike attitude play into the receiving and implementation of guidance?
Well, I want to say you need to be doing a tool called an artist date, which is a solo expedition to do something that delights what you might want to call your inner youngster. And what I find is that if you do artist dates regularly, I have one, I go to a pet store where they have a big bunny. He's the size of my dog. His name is George. And I'm allowed to pet the bunny. And when I pet the bunny, I have a sense of wonder. And that sense of wonder carries over to when I'm trying to get guidance. I find I think playfulness is something that we're not talking about tonight. We should be. Frivolity, joy, bliss, glee, any of those things sort of swing open an inner door to guidance.
And your dog Lily pops in and out and tries to remind us to be more playful. I don't see her at the moment, but she's been coming in and out during the conversation.
Yes, Lily is playful.
It is a very helpful reminder.
I tell her she's a writer's dog. She tries to grab my pens.
Wonderful. Do you have a favorite of all the books you've written over the years? You have over 40 books to your name. Is there one that is your favorite of all of those?
Well, I have two favorites. The first one is my first book, The Artist's Way, which I love and which I continue to work the tools of. And the second book is my new book, Seeking Wisdom. And I have had people say to me that they've read many of my books, but they like Seeking Wisdom the best. So that's my little plug for Seeking Wisdom.
Beautiful. Yeah, this is, there's so much to choose from and such a richness. I know, working at the store here, we have, your books are some of the books that we just, they have to be on our shelves because people come in and they seek them and they want them and they change people's lives. And so thank you so much for what you've contributed. It finds a lot of readers and it changes a lot of lives. So thank you so much. I just wanted to say. Victoria is wondering if you can talk some more about joy, bliss, and glee leading to creativity.
Well, I want to say, follow the path. Start with morning pages, and you may need to vent a little bit, it sounds like. So sometimes people say, well, Julia, I'm afraid to be negative. And I say, well, you're not going to perpetuate negativity. You're going to ventilate negativity. So in order to get to joy, glee, and bliss, you have to sort of walk through the valley of shadows. I think I want to read you another poem. I'm just leafing through to find it. An attraction creates a geography, a territory of the heart, with boundaries, weather, dangers of the trail, a need for plots, compasses, survival kits. You are true north. I want to love you like a map with boundaries and possibilities. I want to love you like a compass with intention and direction. like a knife, a gun, an instinct toward protection. I want to love you like a rope, as thick and strong as hope. So I think that we have a desire for bliss. And I think what I like about seeking wisdom is that it moves you from desire to bliss. So, and I want to recommend finding a bunny named George.
You also, there's something that you say in Seeking Wisdom, I'm not sure where, but about guidance, also having a sense of humor in the guidance. And I think that's interesting, that kind of higher wisdom isn't just serious and, kind of speaks in that spiritual voice. It's fun and can be playful with you as well.
Well, I wonder if I have the poem Angels. We're looking for a poem that is playful, that came to me through guidance. And I found myself, we're just looking for it. It'll take us a second.
Well, while they're looking, I want to mention this book has so many prompts through it. And a lot of the prompts are just so enjoyable to do. I think people are really going to love doing this book a lot.
Well, I find themselves asking questions like, if it weren't so silly, I'd ask God about.
Right.
And we have an idea of God as solemn, and this book hopefully turns that on end. So I'm going to read you a poem that was born out of glee, and it's called Angels. Angels carry on their wings the weight of many unseen things. Without a prayer, they're simply there. They have the grace to know their place. Never intrusive, their help is conclusive. We ask to be guided, and it is decided just who will help and when. Higher forces are our friend. Filled with compassion, they give us a ration of wisdom and of joy. They help us to employ our native wit and sense without a recompense. Ever sly or simply shy, they hide from sight, lend us their might. In short, they ease our way. And so, say thanks today.
That's nice.
That's lovely. Thank you so much for sharing your poems. I know we did have a question about where we can find your poems, and that is on your website. Do I have that right?
Julia's poems are on juliacameronlive.com.
Perfect. And there's links to that in the chat, and I'll pop another one in there before we close. Shelley here is wondering about the content of the morning pages. She says, I find my morning pages is descriptive of the past day. Is this okay? It's a release for me. And by the way, Kristen adds that hers are always wild lists of what I need to do next.
So which question are we answering first?
Well, let's talk about is it okay for the pages to be descriptive of the past day?
It's okay, as long as you're not trying to do it like a diary. What I find with pages is that it's as if you have a little whisk broom and you're poking it into all the corners. So you not only have yesterday's thoughts, but you have thoughts about today and what you might do next. And it often is nonsensical and scattered. So I just want to caution you from trying to write too much like real writing.
That's Lovely. Thank you so much for clarifying that. And so do you have thoughts about having the morning pages be wild lists of what someone needs to do next? Would you kind of say the same thing?
Well, I think the to-do list, I keep a separate sheet of paper and jot my to-do list on that. And morning pages are not just to-do lists. They are lists that say, I hated the way Fred talked to me in the meeting yesterday. I forgot to call my sister back. The car has a funny knock in it. And you find yourself skipping as if you have ADD from topic to topic to topic. And occasionally you'll get a piece of strong guidance like I did about music. And one of the things people worry about is if they should be rereading their morning pages all the time. And I say, don't. If there's an important topic, the pages will bring it up over and over until you're sick of it. So pages are a form of meditation. And just the same way you can't rewind a meditation, we don't want to rewind the morning pages.
Thank you so much for those answers. I just want to add a personal note. My mom is a huge fan of The Artist's Way. She says all the way with The Artist's Way. And I know it really impacted her. She recently burned all 4 years of her morning pages. And I asked her, do you have any regrets? And she said mixed. So just you saying, we don't need to reread them is just so interesting to me. I keep kind of a diary, and I'm thinking like, what am I going to end up doing with this? But it's interesting as it's kind of it leads to something else. It's not, the point itself isn't the morning pages. Do I have that right? It kind of leads to the next thing.
Morning pages lead us a step at a time. And one of the things that guidance tells us is that there is no error in our path. We are led well and correctly. I think I've had people shred their pages, burn their pages, bury their pages. And it isn't, when I was living in Taos, New Mexico, I had a room with a tall ceiling, and it was floor to ceiling morning pages. And I thought, if I ever write a memoir, I'm going to need to reread these, which was daunting. And then I was assigned by Joel to write a memoir called Floor Sample. And I sat down to write, and I found I did not once look back at my morning pages. It was as if just writing them in the first place had made them indelible.
Thank you.
Since we only have a couple minutes left, there's a story, a couple quick questions, Julia, that I think a lot of people can relate to. One is from Jillian, where she writes that she did The Artist's Way when she was drinking. She's now been sober over 450 days. She's doing lots of creative things, but she says doing The Artist's Way again seems overwhelming. Should I try one of these other books? Maybe one of these 6-week books to get clear and focus on her creative calling.
Well, I think if The Artist's Way feels overwhelming, you need to do morning pages. And that's a practice that traces through all the books. And you might like to read The Listening Path next, which is a book about the power of waking up your hearing. And it sounds to me like in your sobriety, you have many voices talking to you. And I think The Listening Path would be useful to you.
So The Listening Path for her seems like the right next thing. And somebody wrote about morning pages. They're not a morning person. Do you have advice for those of us who see the value but have difficulty being a morning person?
Well, I'm going to sound like a Nazi. I'm going to say, do them anyway. That my experience has been that they are often the most powerful for people who are not morning people. Because what you're trying to do is catch yourself before your ego wakes up with its defenses in place. And if you're not a morning person, you're kind of groggy, and that grogginess lends itself to the page.
Right. And then someone else says that their morning pages are repetitive and negative, complaining about work and COVID not being active enough. It does help to declutter the mind, but I worry about wasting my writing time, which is limited.
Well, I want to say I don't think you're wasting your writing time. And I do think that you are going to find Seeking Wisdom a useful book, because I feel like what happens with people who are stuck in the negative is that they need a pathway to find their way to the positive. And I think the prompts in Seeking Wisdom are delightful. And I think that those will start to sort of wake up a different sense in you.
Great. I know, Carell, we're out of time. I know Julie and I both want to say thank you to you and to Bookshop Santa Cruz for hosting this. I'm sorry we didn't get to everybody's question, but we got a lot of them in, which is great.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. Some great questions, and thanks for everyone for asking them. Thank you so much to Catamaran for co-sponsoring. And yeah, I'm really excited about this book. I know that, that you all should be as well. And I love that there's so many to choose from as well. So hopefully there's something that works for everyone. Thank you both so much for being here. What a treat to hear from both of you. And Julia, the High Priestess, it's been such an honor to welcome you to Santa Cruz virtually. And Joel, what an amazing conversation. Thank you so much. I hope we can have you both back in the future. Just a reminder for folks that the link will be sent to you tomorrow around this time, or you can also find it on our YouTube page later, which is in the chat as well. So thank you all so much for joining us, and I look forward to seeing you down the road. Take care, everyone.
Thank
you.
Thank you very much.
Bye.